Right, welcome to Revolution.tv podcast. My name is Adam Johnson. I'm the owner and founder of Revolution. And today we have a great guest from the sales industry, Susan Marot. Hi, Susan. How are you?
I'm great, Adam. I'm great. Thank you for inviting me.
No problem at all. No problem at all. So rather you than me, if you just give everybody just a brief introduction of yourself and what you do, that would be absolutely great.
Well, I'm a sales professional. I'm a sales professional through and through and have been for over 30 years. And what I currently do is I help companies and salespeople to sell a lot more successfully and profitably too. And I do that with, I have online training available for clients. I work one-to-one with clients online, but I also have my corporate clients where they take me to their offices and they put me in front of their sales teams and we help them to upskill them. But also I help my corporate clients, especially with some of the tools they need. So
Yeah.
account plans, maybe they need a sales playbook, whatever that they need to help their salespeople to sell. And I do coaching with my corporate clients as well. So basically anything that helps a salesperson be a lot more successful and make more money for themselves and their company. That's my aim.
So the journey of getting to where you are now, you obviously have your own business very successfully. So just go through the journey of where it started to where you get, because a lot of people have the thing of they fall into sales, right? And that's just, they naturally just fall into that industry and progress through there. But how did you get to being part of sales? How did you get into it to where you are now to actually owning a successful business and being in the Spain as you are right now?
Yeah, I know, it's great here. To be honest with you, I think I'm kind of unusual these days because many salespeople, as you've just said, they kind of fall into sales. Maybe they've been in the operation or the technical side of a business and they fall into sales. I'm very different like that in that I come from a sales background. My mother has always taught me that you come from a family of salespeople, Susan. Retail, they've been in shipping, international trade, insurance even, my ancestors formed the Liver Assurance. So, the Liver building in Liverpool.
Wow.
Their portraits are in the boardroom there. So
wow.
I've always had this culture of you're in sales. And the only person that's not gone into sales in the family is my sister, who's a professor at a university on the South Coast. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, so she couldn't sell anything for toffee, but so, she knows that. So really, I've been brought up with sales. My mother worked at Selfridges. My father was in sales in the retail world, in food retail. So we've had sales all around us. So I have always sold. I sold Avon door to door when I was a young girl to earn some pennies in the local village.
Right.
I sold beer in the local pub when I turned 18. And I sort of then eventually saw an advert for a job at a stationery company in Lincoln, and I thought, what, you get a car with that? Great. In sales permanently because you get a car, this is the 87, I think it was. So I wanted that car. 70 odd people applied and I got the job. So there I was, and they were offering me the job with a car, a bonus and everything else. I'm going, yes. So that's how I got into sales. And I was very fortunate in that I had excellent sales training from the very start,
right.
with like IBM, people like Canon, Xerox, all those, office equipment people that, they wanted their products sold professionally. So they would train people like myself.
Sure.
So that was where it started for me as a professional salesperson, I guess, if he's talking about B2B selling.
Yeah.
So I progressed through a career in the courier industry. I went into the courier industry, progressed into DHL, which is one of the best companies in the world. Became the number one salesperson there. And I felt another challenge coming along and I moved into BPO, business process outsourcing, big contracts, that sort of thing.
Right, okay.
Selling to the public sector. So I'd been, up until that point, I'd been selling to private sector, but then I was selling to the public sector. And I'll tell you what, Adam, it's like hitting your head against a brick wall when private to public,
Yeah, it's crazy. We're dealings with procurement in the public sector, so we know what it is. There's more the systems than the people, let's put it that way.
Yeah, and it's maybe a bit of both as well. It's like, what do you mean that I've got to wait 6 months while the members make a decision on this? This is not right. save you money, but you know, you have a process you have to
Different
go.
world.
Yeah. So you know, so I was working a lot with public sector, with local government, on the back of a deal I did with some police forces for some HR outsourcing. I was headhunted and moved into operational police software. So that was kind of, I was saying, you know, all the stuff that you see in the command and control room, all the technology and the software, doing all of that. If you ever arrested in Derbyshire, that was the first case in custody I sold, was in Derbyshire, that would process you if you ever get arrested there. So that's down to me. If you get a speeding ticket, that's down to me. You know, so there's a lot of things that I've done, and I felt that the one thing that I want to do as part of my challenge or my wish to achieve a better work-life balance and to live a more permanent life abroad, because I'm in Spain now, it's a lovely, healthy lifestyle. I knew I needed to change what I did and the way I sold.
Right.
So I'd always had this passion to help other people to sell more successfully, and do it. And I felt that that was at the time difficult to do within a big organization. So I set my business up to help other people to sell, to share my expertise, my years of cold calling, my years of knocking on doors, my years of meetings, you know.
Sure.
So that's essentially what I do now, is I work with companies who want to tap into what I know and what I can do to help them be as successful as I have been. So I've been in the top 5%. So that's why I set my business up. So because I work with customers online, which is great. I'm halfway up a mountain here.
Yeah.
You know, customers want me to be in front of their sales teams, they fly me. And
Sure.
yeah, I love it.
Great. So what is excuse me. So what motivates you to keep doing it every single day for such a long period of time? What is it? I know at certain stages the motivation might have changed, but what is it, would you say, that drove you apart from the other salespeople? What is in it within Susan that made you that top 1%, or now, you know, a top high achiever within the sales industry now? Because I think that's quite a uniqueness to let people insight into, because I think it's different for everybody personally, but what is it about you? What actually did you see that thought, hey, is it the lifestyle? Was it something at the beginning? What was it that motivated you to get to that top 1%?
Okay, now don't get me wrong, I love money. I really do. Who doesn't, you know?
Oh, exactly.
Like nice things, let's be honest about that. But that has never been a motivation for me in sales. Never. For me, it's about being the best. I'm extremely competitive. You don't want to play me at Scrabble or Monopoly. You really don't. I'm very, very competitive. So that is what has driven me, is to be better than everybody else and to see my name as number one.
Right.
And I know that when I have worked for great companies that have the great products, they have the great sales processes, the great tools, they look after this, you know, and I do what they tell me to do and follow those great processes, sell those great products, I will be successful. And I think that's simply all I've ever done. I look back at my success, and for me, it wasn't anything special. But what I did do is that I did what the company was asking. I followed the training I was given. I took on board information. I learned about things if I didn't know about them already, you know. So I think that I trusted the system. I trusted the process. And without realizing, all of a sudden, I'm on the stage at DHL.
Yeah.
I'm patted on the back. Tina Turner's blaring in the background going, you know, best, and I'm the number one salesperson in the UK.
Wow.
And I'm like, everybody's asking me, what did you do? And I said, I did nothing. I just did what they told me to do. So I think it sounds boring, but that is the secret, I think, to a great salesperson, is to not try and fight, you know, the world. It's, you know, trust the process, trust the people around you, trust your product, and you will be successful. And if you're successful, if you're the number one, the money's flowing.
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah, it looks after itself, I suppose, and that's the vision similar to myself. I think if you're really good at what you do, you narrow down and you I suppose deliver what you preach. I think that's a huge part that people miss. Instead of chasing that, then naturally it will come. So in regards to that, obviously you're extremely passionate, extremely competitive, and I think that's probably where we connect a little bit. I'm also extremely competitive in that side of things, coming from a sports world myself. But I think personally, for me, exactly, I think when I've had staff or big teams to manage, the biggest, and this is me being very open here, but the biggest thing I struggled with was not everybody's the same. You know, you may have the same jobs, you may be in sales for the same reasons. So with regards to when you go into a company to help them transform or gain more successful, what's the biggest challenge you find where people are not competitive? Do you help to find them their own drive, or what's your way of dealing with people like that? Because that becomes more of a people management skill, I think, but also is quite important when you're doing something that you do. Because
yeah. I mean, you don't want a team of Susan Marots. You really don't.
no.
You know, you want, good teams come with a great mix. You want a diverse team as well, one that complements each other. And I think that's where, the real strength within a team comes, because, it'd be nice to have a whole team of high performing salespeople, but really they're like finely tuned racehorses.
Sure.
Got to look after them. They're living almost on the edge. I think somebody explained it to me once that, when they used me as an example, is that they work so very hard to get to that top of that mountain, and they're at the top, they're being praised, but it's very easy just to tip over the edge. So if you've got all those other people around you at various different stages, you've got a stronger foundation, a stronger sales team, one that's going to be sustainable. And that's not going to just, if you had all these competitive people, they'd just explode, and then you haven't got a salesperson. You haven't got a sales.
Sure.
Okay? So I think it is about good team building and identifying everybody's strengths and what they can bring to the party, what their weaknesses are, so that, we can all work together and to solve them and to make them, help them to get better at that. And I think, that is when you bring people all together and you bring them on a journey together and you get buy-in, they will end up helping themselves as a team. They will bond as a team. They'll help improve themselves as a team. And I'm no expert in team building. There's a lot of people.
Of course.
This is my personal experience of being in a team, working with teams, advising leaders of how to create teams. So that's, I think, my sort of viewpoint on, do you need a load of Susan Marots, if you like? Don't try and fill your whole team with Susan Marots.
No, exactly that. But I think it's one thing that probably, especially coming from the position I'm in and where we in that is something that probably mentally I struggle with, because obviously if you are number one, you are that driven, you are a different species, and you are probably of the smaller species. That's why you don't get loads of 100-meter world record breakers as such, because that one person that keeps doing it time and time again isn't just your 9-to-5 individual. It's what's inside that person to a certain extent. And it's just very interesting to see your view on a team dynamic, especially when you start scaling. You've got very, very different people.
Yes.
I have the view that everyone has their own personal motivation on some form of scale. So my job probably isn't to, skill set. I'm not a sales trainer, but actually to understand what that person wants to achieve in life in general or personally, and attach that to and how they get it out of each other, I suppose. And it's great to hear that you mentioned the team dynamic, because it seems very important on that level.
Yeah, I mean, if I take one example of one team with a long time, you've got, maybe out of 10 people, it's a team of 10. And out of that team, there's probably 2 that are really keen as mustard to go as high up the corporate ladder as possible. They want promotion after promotion. They want success. That's what drives them.
Sure.
Or maybe older members of the team who have been around the block a bit. They've been selling 20, 30 years. And that's all they want to do. They know where they want to be. They don't want to go into management. They're good, solid performers. And then you've got the people coming new into the team who just want to do the job. They want to have the skills to do it. So it's understanding and it's not separating these people and say, right, okay, well, we need to treat the salespeople who are already performing one way, and we need to treat the newbies as another. For me, bring them all together, keep them all together so they can learn off each other. And you find those with experience will share with others. And I think for me, that becomes really powerful. So my role becomes less of a trainer.
Yeah.
I'm telling you what to do, more of a facilitator.
Sure.
Bringing it out of them, because, you know, these teams, maybe this one team of 10 people has got, I would say maybe 60, 70 years worth of experience in it.
Sure.
You know, so let's bring it all together in a different way. So
yeah, exactly that. So that brings us on really nicely. So also you made that #1 sales trainer spot, which is a fantastic achievement. Now, that journey wouldn't have been, a lot of people see that, and a lot of people see that and think, oh, you know, I'd love to get there and do it. But a lot of people, I think, struggle with the tough times, especially in sales. And I know you've written articles about it, and there's one that we'll put in the link below. But about dealing with the tough times. So just to give sort of some relevance to people that will listen to this, that may be going through it, is there a time in your career on your way to #1 that was tough for you, that actually you came out the other end, learned a lot of lessons, and that enabled you to get that #1 spot? You know, it'd be great to know how you, now sitting where you are, dealt with that in terms to make it relevant to helping other people.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's the need to recognise where I'm at now. If I start at that point, this way, is I recognise some of the challenges that I will get mentally, physically. And I know I've got coping mechanisms now. So if I look at how my experience helped me to get to where I am now, it's learning those coping mechanisms. So in some ways, I kind of recommend going through tough times in order to learn how to cope with the future. Yeah, because you're invincible in sales. Especially when you're being successful in sales, you think you're invincible. And I kind of think that's what happened to me, in that I'm good, I'm doing my job, I'm doing it really well. And I did really well. And what happened was, as I moved to another sales office, because I wanted a fresh challenge. I'd been #1 at the last one, and I wanted a fresh challenge.
Sure.
And when I got there, it was tough, really tough. The territory had been really run down, but I didn't mind. I was working my socks off. I was turning things around, getting success. But what happened was there was new people that came into that sales team. I was an existing in the company, but new people from outside. And to cut a long story short, I was bullied. And the company, you know, a year or so later, when it all came out, they recognised I'd been bullied. But I was being bullied by some women within the sales team. And it proved to be very difficult. It affected my mindset. I was being distracted by their behaviour. And I would think, I just didn't do the work, if I'm honest, Adam. You know, I wasn't the sales, I wasn't hitting the numbers. It really affected me. And I was then, they had the ear of the boss at the time, and I thought that I was, you know, doing everything I could. But as it turned out, they were saying, Susan is this, Susan is that. And it was all chipping away at the boss. So I had 30 days basically to turn my performance around, as the boss put it.
Right.
He said, you have 30 days to hit this target, do these number of calls, and be nice to everybody in the office, which I'm like, I thought I was doing that anyway, but so I thought, these women are not going to take my job away from me. I love working in this company. It is fantastic. It is the best in the world. It is the #1 in the world. Nobody's taken this job away from me. So I buckled on down and I worked my socks off. And within 30 days, I doubled my target. Nobody had any complaints at all, because I just forced myself to go around going, hello.
Yeah.
Today, you know, I you know, forced myself to be something that maybe I wasn't being honest with. But I turned that around. That then turned into me becoming the #1 salesperson, because I was really going way overboard with my performance to prove to everybody that I was the best. To really, I was working too many hours. I didn't spend time with my friends. I was the number one. I was doubling my target. I was tripling my target. My boss thought it was wonderful. He was then saying, "Oh, Susan, you know, you've done really well this month. Any chance you can help us out because my territory's a bit down, or so-and-so's territory's a bit down. Can you do a little bit more to make up for it?" And I go, "Yeah, of course I can. I'm the best, you know." It ended up, I was like doing 4 times my target.
Wow.
And it was starting to affect my mental well-being. I'm stumbling now. I know you might try editing this out of the interview, but even now I can tell I'm stuttering a little bit at the thought of that. So I went to the doctors. My new boyfriend, who is now my husband, told me to go to the doctors. I went to the doctors, sat there, told him everything. An hour later, of me crying, he signed me off sick.
Right.
And a considerable amount of time off sick with work-related stress. So that was my low point. That is what I let sales do to me. In a way, the company didn't really do it. They didn't recognize the signs of what was happening.
Yeah.
But I let that happen to me. I didn't have a good work-life balance. So this is one of the reasons I am where I am now in Spain doing what I do, because I recognize that sales can become this all-consuming world disease. It overtakes you and it can really affect this. So I've now learned to introduce myself coping mechanisms. You know, we have a dog. Oh, everybody should get a Labrador. You know, if you're working too many hours, there's a dog that starts whining and wants to go for a walk. It gets you out of the office, away from your desk.
Yeah.
And that is the sort of thing, having a better work-life balance in terms of working more from home, being able to be more flexible in my work, you know, to turn work down, to work at a weekend if I want to.
Yeah.
Out during the week, you know, these are all of the things I do now. And I only learnt how to do all of that because of the really low place I was at all those years ago. So it does sound weird, but sometimes you've got to go down to come back up again. And that's exactly what I did. And I came back even better than I was before as a result of going through all of that. So does that help, Adam?
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. And I'm listening because I find this story fascinating because I relate to it quite a lot, you know. And I think being in a position where like I said to you before we even started this, I'm in the best position I could ever dreamed of at the age I am at. But it doesn't come, you know, what people don't see is I think they go through it but don't talk about it. But also I think to achieve the success you want to achieve, not what the market want you to achieve, I think it's what I'm really fascinated about is other people that go through times like you've just explained, because it's relative to people right now. I think the market in certain industries is harder than it's ever been. And I think there's a lot of people probably suffering in that side of things. And hearing stories from people like yourselves, even from me in what I do, is I think it's more important sometimes than showing skill sets, because it shows actually it's what it takes to come out the other side, you know. And I think you either need to make a choice in that way. It's like a fork in the road, isn't it? I think you need to make a choice as, you know, this isn't life for me, I need to move on. Or actually, you know, that competitive, that drive needs to come out. I am going to be number one. I'm not going to fail. I'm going to. So at that key stage, I've got one question. At a key stage for you, was it focus? Is that what drove you to block out the noise, I suppose? Is to really focus on what that key task was for the next 30 days. Did you narrow that down to, right, today I've got to achieve this, tomorrow I've got to achieve this? Was that the mindset you had?
Yeah, it suddenly dawned on me I had something about it, and I had 30 days to basically do it. You know, sure. I'd been told that it was, Susan, you have to hit this target in numbers, in revenue, you have to, you know, do this number of calls, and you have to, you know, be pleasant to everybody, because I was accused of being, you know, an outsider.
Yeah, of course.
I was just there to work, and everybody else would have multiple cigarette breaks, you know, coffee breaks, all of that. And I'm like, I'm here to work, you know. And I was criticised, I think, for being not with the in crowd, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, of course, within, yeah.
The peer pressure there. So what I did is I looked at what I had to do. I looked at that target and said, right, what do I need to do to hit that target? Okay, what's my customer base like? Who do I think I can go and whose door can I knock on and know I'm going to get new business from them, revenue that is going to bring me and hit me that number. And I totally focused on those clients that would bring me the revenue I needed within that time scale. Now, I had some longer deals going, you know, because you always need to keep something going. But for those 30 days, I closed every single one down. I did my sales calls perfectly. I analysed my performance after I came out of a call. If I'd not won the business, what had I not done? What had made me lose that business? You know, so it was about, you know, because even though you learn how to do something, you can always improve. So I was analysing, I was focusing, I was hitting the numbers, I was picking up the phone, I was knocking on the door, I was just doing the work. And that was why I hit my target easily in 30 days. And that is why I think I then started this journey of escalation down into the pits of despair of mental well-being.
Yeah, sure.
I was pushing myself too hard. I'd got on a roller coaster that was just spiraling out of control, if you like. So that was where the balance, I struggled with the balance, but it was, the focus was just doing the work. That company, they knew what worked. They knew you had to do 24 calls every week. 18 of those had to be prospect calls, half of which had to be, you know, you only took 2 meetings at a prospect call to win the business. You would do probably 40 to 50 cold calls on 1 day a week in the office. You know, they knew the numbers you had to do. And when I said to you, you know, you've just got to follow the process. If you've got a that knows what it is their salespeople need to do to be successful, it's easy. All you've got to do is follow that process as a salesperson.
Sure.
So I went overboard though.
No, exactly. And I think sometimes you have to, with those sorts of things, you do go from one extreme to the other, because I think especially when probably the competitive nature partly has something to do with it. There's almost that, you know, I'm not going to fail. And that does come in at some point. You know, I know you probably have a few days and that sort of thing. I've had the same, but I'm not going to fail. I'm not going to let this outside environment affect my life. I'm going to get what my goal is, but it does push you to the other end. You become distance, you know, and social aspect, especially for me personally, you know, I lost a previous relationship because of that. I went the other extreme and lost probably personal things rather than professional things. And then it sort of, then you find that, I think, that medium balance then. Yeah,
I think I'd always had a tendency. For me, when I do anything, my attitude has always been, I always think I'm a lazy person. Okay, this is, you know, I always think I'm a lazy person you know, because I'll not do something unless I've really got to do it. But when I've really got to do it, I will do it to the best of my ability.
Sure.
It will be the very best, you know. So, and that is not so much me being lazy, as one manager, I think it was the director at DHL said, because I said that to him, you know, I think I've been quite lazy, really. I maybe could have done a bit better. And he said, you're not being lazy, Susan, you're being smart. You're putting, you know what works, and you're putting your time and effort into what works in the areas that you know it will work and deliver return for you. You're not wasting time on other stuff. And I think that's important to great salespeople as well, is that they focus on the thing that is going to get them what they need to do.
Right.
You know, they're hitting target now, or whether it's hitting target in 3 months' time, 6 months' time, or a year's time. They know exactly how much effort to put into that sales process to get the return on investment they need. That's why, and that was something I learned from going through my journey of being out of control, is that I learned the balance.
I suppose that's the terminology of working smarter, not harder, isn't it? I think you can work as hard as you like. You can work, if you're working in the wrong directions, then you're not working very smart. And I think some people take that terminology and think actually working smarter is only working 9 to 5 or working, but it's actually designating your time, isn't it, to something that's going to obtain the results. Exactly. So that moves on quite nicely to your achievement side of things, and when you did focus and get those, you needed quick wins, basically, didn't you, at that period of time? So now the expertise you've got and what you teach other people, the whole thing at the moment is all over social media, is a whole quick win thing. And I think there is a lot of, I won't go into what it is, but there is, you can do this technique and you'll win your next 9 out of 10 sales calls, for example. And I think there's a lot of that going on. But so regards to your version of a quick win, describe to me how and what a quick win means to you as a salesperson. You know, how do you obtain the quickest reduction in process, I suppose, to get that sale closed?
For me, about really understanding that client. It's having your pipeline full, so you've got a variety of opportunities in your pipeline, and knowing all of them really well and what stage they're at. So when you need a quick win, you know, when times are tough, you know exactly which of those clients to go to make them an offer, maybe. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Give
sure.
what they need. And I'll give you an example of this with, if you know, if that makes it
Yeah, no,
really.
perfect.
I totally agree with you. There's no magic pill. There's no magic pill. It's about knowing your customers and knowing which ones you can go to. An example of that was, and I better not say the industry because it's, but basically IT software.
Right.
I was responsible for getting new business, but also renewals of licenses and that sort of thing as well. And I had the directors came to me one day and said, Susan, we've got 1 month until the end of December. We've got a shortfall. You know, what have you got up your sleeve? What can you do? Because salespeople are famous for having a few things up their sleeve, and I think that's what's important is you know, having a variety of opportunities bubbling away, so that if you do need something, you can pull it out the bag. So what I did was I actually looked at all of those clients that had rate agreements and service level agreements expiring over the next 3 months. And I looked at those I thought I could go into and say, look, do you know what? We will do a cracking special deal if you sign sooner rather than later, before the end of the year.
Sure.
And we'll make it really attractive for include this, include that, or we'll extend this, or whatever it is. And that's basically what I did. And I managed, and it took about 10 days. I actually closed £180,000 worth of business from start, purely by looking at what might be coming and thinking, well, okay, what can we do to bring that forward? You know, what are the offers that we could do to make that happen sooner rather than later? Because that business needed that revenue in.
Yeah,
it needed 180,000.
Yeah.
So that's what you do. You know your customers, you know what's going to happen to them, how they're feeling, what you get to know what could make them decide to buy from you sooner rather than later. And when you know all these things about your customer, about your product, that's when you can, you know, create something. That's where you can go and ring them up and say, because these were senior decision makers who basically, you take you 2 months to get a meeting with them.
Sure.
You point through the building great relationships that you can pick up the phone on a Friday afternoon, speak to an executive, a C-suite executive, and say, look, if we could do something on this, would you be interested if it meant signing before Christmas or after Christmas?
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
And that can be scary for a salesperson to do, you know, to think, I've got to pick up the phone to this executive, I've got a senior person, I've got to pitch to them an idea to spend more money now, more money they might not have. But, you know, if that means getting the business in sooner, I get the pat on the back, I get the commission sooner.
Yeah, sure.
Me, it was about the ego, you know. I'm like, yeah, come on, somebody set me a challenge, you know. I'd love to. It's like, come on, Susan, you can do this before Christmas, and I'd go out and do it. That's the bit about selling I love, is being creative and finding a way to make a deal happen. And that's the low-hanging fruit, if you like, you know, the quick wins. So that's how I've approached quick wins. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And with regards to those offers that you make, I think a lot of, especially I've seen in the past, especially as we're getting bigger, is when we need quick wins. A lot of people instinctively think that that's offering a discounted price. That's what's going to do it. Something that I picked up very interesting in what you've said is knowing your customer. So when you approach those, when you mean quick win, it isn't just picking up the phone and offering another 20% discount, because obviously generally that means you've got to do more work to get to the target. You're just knocking yourself down. So what's your view on that? Is it something you would approach and say, right, okay, I'm going to analyze this client. What is it that really, really means something? Just talk me through that process, if that's okay.
Well, what we actually did was, I knew that they wanted to have longer term agreements, and we'd been very reluctant to do We were doing a lot of term licensing rather than perpetual licenses.
Sure.
What we actually did was that we actually did a deal that meant that they had a perpetual license, but we were only going to offer it in the next 30 days.
Right, okay.
So that was something that was attractive to them.
Right.
It's not all about money. You don't have to discount to get a quick win. You maybe look at something else. It might be that as a business, you might need to get payment in pretty quick. But the normal terms of business means that it's 60 days.
Sure.
But if you went to a customer and said, well, look, if you buy this in the next week, we will give you a discount.
Yeah.
Now, you as a business, your cash flow means that if you get that money in now, in the next week, instead of the next 60 days, that can mean you don't have to pay out on financing. And that cost of that financing might more than compensate for that small amount of discount you give to that customer.
Sure.
Really, it's about, as a salesperson, I'm talking big deals here.
Yeah, of course.
It's knowing what is important to your customer, but also what's important to you and your business as well. Because I knew that the finance director had given us this, what to most people was a very boring speech at one of the conferences about the cost of financing, and it costs this. And everybody's going, sorry, finance directors, but that's kind of what happened. They're great with numbers, but they know that. But I picked up on this, that financing cost money.
Yeah,
and
sure.
If my company did less financing, I could offer a bit of discount to my customers. So that's what I did.
Interesting.
He gets a win. My customer gets a win. I get commission. Happy days. It's as simple as that.
It's all in perspective of the business needs is what you're saying, isn't it? And then finding how that attaches to a need or an appeal to your prospect in terms of, it could be terminants, it could be, but it's looking at that match between the two instead of just jumping straight in and going, right, I need another 100 grand. I'm going to offer like 30, 40%. And I've seen scary discounts just to get it through the door. Do you think that has something to do with experience as well? Do you think that's something that, because obviously in that industry is something that it's almost like a reactive, isn't it? And it's the time of any advice you'd give is take a step back, look at actually what is important to your business and why you're being asked, I suppose, and then look at your pool of prospects, say, what have I got right now that's almost like the candy, I suppose.
Yeah, the low-hanging fruit to use. Overused term. Okay. It comes down to one thing, Adam.
Yeah.
I look back as to when I stopped being an okay salesperson, a good salesperson who hit target, and to the point where I very suddenly became the best salesperson.
Right.
Really at the top of my game. And that was when I realized that before that point, I was always thinking my customer is my goal. They're my king. I've got to do everything my customer says. I've got to be out in front of customers. I've got to be on the phone to customers. It's customers. The business can do what. I didn't do my reports on time for the business. Sure. I didn't respond to emails as quickly as I should have done because that's the business. But customers, I looked at. Okay. But then I suddenly realized I did something for somebody internally. It was credit control, actually. Is that the credit control woman, that when I met her, she said, Susan, we've got this customer, problems with paying. What can you do? So I went in to see the customer. We had a talk. I ended up getting more business, funnily enough, because the reason they weren't using us was because they were getting better credit terms elsewhere. So we came to a deal. We negotiated. I got better credit terms. I got all the business. I had to give them a little bit of a discount on the price. But anyway, I suddenly realized that by communicating with my credit control in their office behind me and finding out what they needed from me, I was actually able to do a better deal with my client. So the penny dropped, the light switch came on. I realized at that point that I had to look after not just my customer, my external customer, I had to look after my internal customers as well.
Yeah.
The people who were supporting me, the credit controllers, the directors who needed to get me to, bring business on board, the operational people who needed me to communicate when business was going to start so that they could plan for a deluge of new business coming on board.
Yeah, of course.
the finance people, everything. So it was that was the point when I started to become really successful. Was I recognized I've got two customers. I've got external customers, internal customers, and you have to give sufficient amount of time to both, not the same amount
Very
of time.
interesting.
So that is when I just went from here to
I think
stratosphere.
that's a fantastic point, and I think that's something that, especially being new to the industry, you do think and you get trained, I think, to a certain extent. I'm not saying everybody trains like it, but I've been through training where it is very focused, not technically, looking after the home first, I suppose, let's call it that, before you look at what's outside. I think just one thing that I wanted to touch on afterwards was, I think, in my view, looking from the outside, I don't by no means class myself as a sales professional, but looking from the outside, I think there's a whole probably generation that's got quite comfortable in the way that things are at now. And I think the problem is that sales is a very out person. You need to, in my opinion, to be in the top 1%, you need to be really out there. You need to be active. You need to be proactive and all this sort of thing. The environment we now live in with social and technology, I suppose, let's call it that, do you see it's had an effect on the industry? And what is that effect in your view? I'm asking you as probably more of a professional than I am by any stretch, but I see it as it's almost giving someone a comfort blanket in my view. But I'm just interested to know what your view on it is not really how to use it or anything, but what's that effect you think has had, and what's your advice on people that look at their team and go, actually, most of them are just sitting on their computers in something that I can only class as probably a church.
Well, I started selling in a world that didn't have. I tell you what, we had. One of the first things I sold in 1989 was an Amstrad computer and a little Apple Mac.
Yeah.
They were about £4,000.
Wow.
At the time, there was a tiny little box and that.
Yeah.
But we were still running on paperwork. These were luxury goods at the time. The Amstrad computer was about £2,000 when it first came. And the world has changed an awful lot. And I think that quite naturally, technology has improved and it's brilliant. I love it. We would not be talking today, me sat in Spain and you sat, in the UK.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Technology. But I think it's learning how to use that technology to get the sale. And I think that is what is confusing a lot of salespeople. And it's definitely confusing a lot of sales leaders. I regularly get contacted by sales leaders in big corporations saying, Susan, do you know a good LinkedIn trainer? Somebody who can teach my people LinkedIn, because I think they need to know how to do LinkedIn. They need to know how to do social media.
Sure.
I'm going, okay, so why do you think you need to do LinkedIn? And they say, well, we've been told we need to do LinkedIn, and we need to get them learning how to do it. But do they need to learn how to do LinkedIn? And if they do LinkedIn, how much time and effort should they put into it? Is it part of their sales strategy for their business? Do their ideal customers, are they on LinkedIn? How much time should they spend on LinkedIn? Because they're given this LinkedIn training and they think it's great and they get into this, I have to post every day, I have to do a video, I have to do this, I have to do that. Is it going to deliver the return on investment that business needs? And in many businesses, it won't.
No, interesting.
Okay? So it's about having the right strategy for social selling within a business, first and foremost, before you suddenly decide, right, okay, we all need to get social selling. And what can happen is that you're almost encouraging people to do social media, but it's a one-way street. They're not connecting with the customer. And good salespeople need to connect and have relationships with the customer. Simply going on LinkedIn and showing a video once a week or having a few words is not truly a two-way thing. I mean, we've had conversations on LinkedIn before we started talking.
Of course.
But in the space of a few minutes, we've learned so much more about each other, talking and communicating before we started this interview.
Yeah.
No amount of time on LinkedIn would have helped us achieve that. So it really, I think it's confusing for businesses to know how much time and effort to put in. And those people who are not the extroverts, if you like,
Sure.
who fear LinkedIn and say, I ain't going to use it, they will never use it. And if it is important to that business to use LinkedIn, well, they're missing out. And I choose LinkedIn because it's one that, for the B2B world is
Yeah, of course. Of course.
So does that answer your question, Adam?
It does, yeah. And quite frankly, it sort of reiterates my belief in the whole thing as well. I think selling is an art form, I think, in certain things. To be aware, majority of companies would either love to be or need to be. I think you need to, it's an art form within itself. And I just see a lot of, I suppose the way I would call it is I look at it at the moment from, we try to bring technology to industries to help them. But it's a case of actually, I see it as very muddy waters. And for those, I've had teams, I've had probably 2 members of staff in the previous team that I had where they weren't similar to me, for example. I love talking to somebody and I love connecting with that person, whether it's business or not. I love a conversation because I think you just learn so much and so like a sponge almost, and that's what feeds off. But having a text relationship just doesn't appeal to someone like me. Whereas I know people that want to come in the industry and they have come in the industry, or they may have, or they class as fallen in the industry and they're not that sort of person. It does create a safety blanket. And that's a big, it's a concern of mine, actually. They then get pressure on from their bosses saying you're not delivering them. And it may deliver leads. It may deliver, like anything, activity, I suppose. But as you rightly said, I think it's when it narrows down to what is the return on investment, the money in the bank account. And that's where my concern is a little bit. And it's interesting to get your view on it and see whether it's similar, because obviously I approach it from a very different side, from someone that's not really social media active. I use it because I need to use it and our brand uses it. But we're even now looking to get someone to do our social media because it's just, and actually, if you look at the time you need to get something back on a return, you have to dedicate so much time to it.
Yeah, exactly. And that is what be a very expensive, and I'm not just talking, okay, this comes back to any form of lead generation.
Sure.
Marketing. And all it is that, online marketing, digital marketing has become stronger and bigger. And, over the years, since I first started selling, when I first started selling, marketing was just the leaflet with all the products in, and you posted it, old-fashioned snail mail, in the post to your customers. That's all you did, really, or you put an advert in the paper. Now there are multiple ways that you can communicate with your customers. So therefore, marketing has increased in the world.
Yeah.
And more marketing professionals, digital online marketers, the whole bang shoot. So, and if we don't understand how to integrate sales and marketing together so that marketing can help sales to become more effective and marketing learn the right ethical sales practices, so I think sometimes you've touched on it there, this magic pill that many marketers will try selling. Buy my magic pill and you will sell 99% of, you'll close 99% of your business, for example.
Yeah.
Doesn't happen like that. Okay, so it's understanding, what everything can do, and the only way you can do that is go back to your customers. Understand who your customers are, create avatars for them, talk to your customers, find out who your ideal customers are. Where do they go? Where do they hang out? Because that might not be, you need to understand what's going to be the best way of getting in front of them. It might be that, some people you send emails to, some people you pick up the phone because they respond to phones and it's too expensive to go and have meetings with them.
Yeah.
Other people, you need to get creative about your appointment making, and you need to maybe stalk them at an event and accidentally on purpose bump into them. Now, yeah, that's something I really enjoy doing. That's another subject.
It's quite fun, I would have thought.
Yeah. So, but it takes time.
Yeah.
It takes time to do that. So it's understanding, what your customers, where they go, where they hang out, what makes them buy, and then match the correct sales process to it. So if you're a big investor, a big company, you're going to spend a lot more time preparing. You'll create a strategy getting in front of them. And it might be that stalking, accidentally on purpose bumping into them as they come out of their office,
Sure.
that might be part of that. So, social media, no amount of social media, if that is your target market, is these big decision makers, no amount of social media over here is going to get you in front of them.
No.
So it's understanding the balance. And that is the challenge for businesses, is understanding they need to go back to the drawing board, look at their customers in great depth, talk to their customers, find out what they do, what makes them buy, and then match the sales process that is right for them.
Absolutely love that, because it's something we spoke about before, and I think so it's not really down to the individual, is it? If they go into an environment and that's it's down to the means above, I suppose, to really put the strategy in place to give them the toolbox.
Yes.
In terms of what is right for the strategy and to get the results. So here's a question, and I think it's probably one of my final questions I've got for you. So if I was brand new if I sat at my desk for the first time in sales, what would be, as one of probably the highest achievers I've met in sales, what would be your top 3 tips for action for me to get to where you are now? What would be your advice for me, but giving me at least 3 to 5 clear action points of advice of what to do, what to become Susan Marot of the future?
So you've just started in your new sales job,
Yep.
and what you do. Okay, if you are being taken on by a great company who already has a very clear sales process, I would say trust the process. Do not fight the process. Don't argue with the number of calls you're being asked to do. Don't say, oh, I've not got time to deal with the CRM. Use those tools, use that process. It has been well tested. It should have been well tested. If you use those tools and those processes and you still fail, that is not your fault. That is the business's fault. And they will take responsibility for it. If they are a good, responsible business, they will take ownership. Okay? A good manager will not blame the salesperson when they know this, they've tried their best. So just follow the sales process. So that's one thing I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The next thing I would say is don't be afraid to get creative. Don't be afraid of just doing the stuff. It's daring to be different in sales. It's about doing something that's a little bit different from everybody else to stand out. Maybe saying something a little bit differently. I've got a really quick one for you here. I've talked about it recently, but I'll talk about it again. I sold operational software to the police. Okay, I'd heard a rumor about a £20 million outsourced contract. So what I decided to do to get a meeting with the head of police, the chief constable, was to stalk him. Okay, to stalk him. Okay, so what I did, this was in the days before the police and crime commissioners in the UK. We had the police authorities.
Sure.
So members of the public are allowed to go to police authority meetings, and there was one coming up in a few days' time. I went to that meeting and I'm sat there. There was 2 BBC journalists and me. And we were sat at the back of the room. The whole police authority were there. There was the treasurer. There was all the members of the board, the police chief, his assistant. Wow. Everybody was sat there. And I'm the only member of the public. And when the chair opened the meeting, he said, I would like to welcome the members of the public. We'd like to welcome the members, the journalists. And also, we have a member of the public today. I was the first one they'd had for months and months and months. And I was sat there just smiling in my best suit with my best shoes on and my best smile, and they knew who I was immediately. And he said, welcome to our meeting. We hope you enjoy it. And I said, I stood up and I said, thank you very much for inviting me. And I sat down again and didn't say another word. And I listened intently, but every single person then knew who I was.
Yeah.
A few days later, I then ring up the assistant, the PA to the chief constable. And I said, oh, hi, I'm Susan. I believe that you've, from this company, I believe you've got this opportunity happening. I was at the meeting last week, and I believe there's a lot of value in having a meeting with the police chief in advance of the procurement starting. Because once the procurement starts in public sector, you cannot get meetings with decision.
No, you can't, no.
The shutters come down. So that's what happened. 1 week later, I had a meeting, sat in front of the police chief, having an off-the-record conversation about this procurement before it actually went out to tender.
Right.
So in that, that is something that salespeople need to do, is think outside the box. That's outside the box creative thinking. So don't just think, I have to make a phone call and I'll get rejected. You can do other things as well. Now for that, about return on investment, that was a £20 million deal. It was worth a day or so of my work time.
Cool. Yeah.
Talk them. So don't be afraid to get creative, I would say, is what will take you from a good salesperson to a really top salesperson. So that's the second one, is it?
Yeah, second one, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Next one, I mentioned it earlier on. Remember, you, as well as your customers that you're selling to and making money from, you have internal customers behind you.
Yeah.
Make friends with as many people within your business as possible, from credit control to finance to operations. Just get to know them, get to know what is important to them. And trust me, when you need them on your side, when you need the best deal possible, the best price possible from finance, or when you need your credit controller to extend the credit terms because your customer can't pay on time because they've got problems in their business, whatever the reason,
yeah,
they'll back you. They will be there for you. They might not be there for a salesperson who doesn't talk to them. Okay, so make friends with everybody.
Interesting. Yeah, it's relationship, internal stakeholder relationships, I suppose, to a certain extent.
Most certainly, just make friends with everybody.
Brilliant.
And what else would I say? I think just focus. Think about what's going to get you the business. Don't waste time doing stuff that is not going to ultimately result in a sale. It's understanding return on the investment you put in, the amount of effort you put in.
Yeah.
I have worked long hours in the past, but to be honest with you, I've done some of my best work when I've just done 40 hours in a week.
Sure.
By focusing. So if you trust the process, you get creative, you focus, build relationships with as many people as you meet, and build rapport. And I think one thing to say about that, and this is very tricky, I can't really tell somebody to improve their rapport building skills. You can practice rapport building, but study empathy, use empathy, understand how empathy can really help you with rapport building. Asking questions like, how do you feel about your current supplier, instead of, what does your current supplier do? Asking, to get to the person and how they feel about a situation. But that's quite advanced stuff. I think I learned empathic curiosity through experience and time, and it's a very difficult thing to teach, really.
I think being aware of it early on is quite key. I know you probably don't need to, you obviously hopefully you'll get a training path with all these marvelous things on it, but one thing that I really like on there is your being aware of empathy. I think that's hugely important, because people forget they're actually just talking to other people. It's human to human interaction. And I think that's probably the biggest skill I think has helped me in my career alone. Is actually, I'm a people person, I'm a people guy, and I actually am fascinated by other people. Obviously empathy comes into that. But I think it's absolutely fantastic. I think you've given so much value to people out there. So thank you so much for that. Now, the last thing we've got, most important than ever, is how do people get hold of you, Susan? Where do they follow on social and your website, etc.?
Okay. The main point of contact for me, and also I've got a stack load more content on there, is my website. Brilliant. And my website, very simple, it's called succeedatselling.com. Okay, succeedatselling.com. I have, you can access 100 odd blogs on there with all the sorts of content that I talk about. My online training can be accessed from there. I have a wide variety of online training, some just a few pounds, others hundreds of pounds, coaching, sales training, the lot. And you can also contact me there. I have all my links to my social media on there, but the one I'm most active on is LinkedIn. So all you need to do if you want to connect with me is type in my name, Susan Marot, and that's Marot. It's a very unusual name, but I'm the only one on LinkedIn. So if people say they can't find me, they're really not.
Means I haven't looked hard enough. So all the links will be below at the end of this video, and they'll also pop up on the screen for people who can connect with you directly. I just want to say a massive thank you, Susan, for your time, and thank you for being on Revolution.tv's podcast.
Thank you very much for asking me, Adam.
No problem.